Thanks to those in the public gallery and from the press. It's the Thursday, the 24th July meeting of the Environment and Sustainability Policy Committee. And so welcome to the meeting. The 9 members of committee are myself and the 8 members sitting on my left in these benches. We have officers who will be presenting reports and supporting the committee at the side and here. And welcome to work experience students as well. Would the committee members like to introduce themselves? I'll start as I'm Councillor Martin Fodor, Chair of the committee. Could we go along the front row there? Kirsty.
Hello, I'm Councillor Ellie King, Member for Hillfields and Vice Chair of this committee, the Environment Sustainability Committee.
Hi, I'm Kirsty Tate. I'm a Hartcliffe and Wivywood Ward Councillor. Also have worked for Hartbase 13.
Councillor Kydard, Member for Southmead.
Abby Finch, Councillor for St George Central.
Tim Kent, Councillor for Hengrove and Whitchurch Park Ward.
James Crawford, Councillor for Bishopston and Ashley Down Ward.
Izzy Russell, Councillor for Ashley Ward.
And Mark Weston, Councillor for Henbury and Brentry.
Great, thanks very much for the introductions. Just by way of safety information, we're not expecting a fire alarm. So the emergency evacuation procedure, just to remind you, is in the event of an alarm sounding, please do walk calmly from the room through the lobby. There are doors there, or at the back. Assemble in after the front door of the council, go down to the right and we assemble in front of the cathedral. Thanks very much. We've got no apologies for absence or substitutions, so we have all the members of the committee here. That's excellent. Are there any declarations of interest of any members with items on the agenda?
Just that I work for Hartbase 13, so when we talk about community climate action plans, I've been involved there.
Thanks very much. Okay. We have them.
Sorry, just on that, Chair, given that it was mentioned, obviously the community climate action plans are mentioned in one of the reports, just to declare that I'm a trustee at Southmead Development Trust, obviously a member of that project.
I'm a trustee of Hillfields Community Garden, also a recipient of the Community Climate Action.
That's great. Thanks very much for that and for your involvement in it. Minutes of the last meeting. This was held on the 29th of May. It's been circulated. They are published now, aren't they? Not yet. Oh, these are about to be published. There was an embargo for an exempt item. We have had that lifted now, so they will be published now and should be available shortly. Feel free, the members who've seen the draft minutes, to raise anything about the public items in there. Does anyone have anything relating to the public items from previous meetings? No. Can we take those as a correct record, and the additional item will be added when they're published shortly? Could someone else second the minutes?
I'll second the minutes.
Thanks very much, Ellie. All right. Okay. Chair's announcements. I've got two pieces of good news that I'd like to share with the committee, if you haven't already heard, and with the public, both based on previous business at this committee. We're delighted to say that the Nature in Cities grant, which we discussed at a previous meeting, has been successful. I regret it had to be an exempt item at the time because the bidding had not closed for that fund, and we didn't want to make our bid public ahead of the other people putting in their bids. We've been successful, got I think it's 85% of what we funded, almost £1 million. And I'd like to thank those involved in that project. We're really looking forward to working with partners in the city. And I'd like to thank those who've supported that bid and fed into that, including groups like the Parks Forum and the other partners who we're looking forward to working with you. And it will, as a project supporting community action on nature, for instance, one thing it will do that I know has come up during my time as chair is it'll create a single front door for working with the council that we hope will work better to enable and support and help build community action on nature in the city. The second piece of good news is, again, unfortunately, it had to be an embargoed item because the funding partners hadn't made it public yet. We've been successful with a Solar in Schools funding bid. There will be funding from the government coming through the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority for 12 schools and related buildings to get solar on them, and that's great news for progressing solar power in the city. So we're delighted with that news. The next item is public forum. We've got a number of items tabled and not everyone attending. I was going to suggest we take a couple of statements first and then the question that we're expecting. Do we have a microphone for people? Yeah, thank you very much. So we've got statements that we're expecting from Sarah Kemlin first and then Professor Harriet Bradley second. Sarah, would you like to take a minute or so to summarise your statement? I hope all members have received and read those statements.
So tell me if I'm holding the microphone wrong.
Correct? No, that's correct. Thank you.
So our statements, this is about the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And our statements give the background to the treaty, the starting point and its progress led by climate vulnerable nations, and its pathway from small beginnings to attracting widespread support. And that's similar to the path taken by the landmines and the nuclear weapons treaties. It aims to bring down the supply of fossil fuels, to have a fair phase out with wealthier and historically more responsible nations reducing emissions the fastest, and a just transition. Bristol is already progressing these aims as a leader in climate action. Treaty endorsement would affirm Bristol's position as leading by example with strong cross-party support and encourage wider endorsement, but would involve no financial commitments. So far, 17 governments, 135 subnational governments, nearly 4,000 leading international civil society, faith, medical, charity and climate organisations have endorsed it, and 1 million individual signatures, which include names like the Dalai Lama and Ban Ki-moon, many people you would recognise. The city councils come from every continent, with the greatest number from Europe, including Bristol's twin city, Bordeaux. I have a list here, if you wish, of the 18 UK local authorities who have endorsed it, with every major political party represented. So we therefore hope that the committee will include consideration of endorsement of the treaty in its revision of Bristol's climate strategy.
Great, thanks very much. Would you like to pass the microphone to Harriet Bradley? Thanks.
Hi, thanks for letting me speak. I hope you've all managed to read the statements that we sent, but I'd also like to, if you haven't seen the treaty campaign website, I'd really recommend you to look at it because it's extremely interesting to see how many people have supported it. One thing that is very notable and appears in one of the other statements is that faith communities of all brands of faith community have endorsed the treaty. What I want to say is really I'm just rather surprised that Bristol hasn't already signed up to this treaty because of our proud record in Bristol of supporting climate. You all know, I'm sure, we were the first council to declare a climate emergency. The council has also done a lot in reducing emissions across the centre of the city, exactly, particularly through the clean air zone. And the air is much improved, I believe. And this is very important because when I was a councillor in Brislington, a lot of my constituents told me how their children were suffering from asthma. Off-road. Oh, sorry. Okay, so it seems to me that it's in line with all that we should support this campaign for a treaty. The other thing that I want to say is that it's also in line with another factor which is very central to Bristol's identity, and that is support for the parts of the world which are less privileged. As the little notice out there tells you, We signed up to be a city of sanctuary in 2011. And we are a proud, I think, multicultural community and an example of how multiculturalism can work successfully. And I think that's something that's really, to me, that's a very strong reason for being proud of being in Bristol. So this, as Sarah has said, the just transition is an important part of the treaty campaign. And I think it's very important that we endorse that. I think it should be a source of civic pride, and that it will help to consolidate Bristol's international reputation as a progressive, caring and compassionate city. So thanks for listening.
Thanks very much.
Please do read the statements if you haven't.
Thanks very much. We've got a question in the public forum related to that. Would Sarah like to see? You've tabled the question. We have seen it. I hope we've all been shared with that. Would you like to just reiterate it?
Okay. We understand that the committee will be redrafting the Council Climate Action Plan in November. So please will the committee include in the plan endorsement of the widely supported Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. Many other British and Irish councils are signatories to the treaty, and we feel Bristol should show initiative in joining them.
Thanks very much. Just to give you a sort of initial response, I think that's a perfectly reasonable request. I'm happy for it to be included in the report we're going to get in November. We'll have a look at that when it comes. It could be a recommendation in that report, and obviously committee members will have the opportunity to discuss that when the time comes. But I hope we get a chance to look at it then. And the officers who will be preparing that, Alex Minchell is here. So it could be added as a recommendation as you've requested. I don't see any problem with that. It will be an item that can complement our action on climate, which we'll be revising at that time in the November meeting. So I hope that's satisfactory. Thanks. Okay. If you had a supplementary question, feel free to ask.
They're on the same theme. So it's really, what do you see, if any, as the disadvantages of Bristol City Council endorsing the treaty, and what do you see as the advantages of the City Council endorsing the treaty? So it's very much on the same theme. Okay.
Well, just in response sort of now, I don't personally see any disadvantages. I think you've made the case quite well that there are benefits, there are consistencies with us supporting it, but it will be for the committee at the time in November to discuss that. If they want to raise any problems, they could, but personally I don't see any reasons. So thank you for that. That's the end of public forum. We now have no other participants who've got public forum attended. So we've got item 7, which is on electricity metering. It's a report to seek approval to procure and award a contract for electricity metering services and data services. It is a key decision, something that has to come to committee because it involves a spend or a save of over £500,000. We've got David Gray to present the report, and could I just say in advance, thank you for providing a very clear layperson's guide, which is helpful for councillors who are lay people, by and large, to what it means, which is one of the appendices to the report. Thank you for
that. Right. Good evening, everyone. Yes, as Councillor Fodor said, this is a request to let a new metering and data management contract. Metering is one of those sort of back office functions that doesn't grab the headlines, but is absolutely essential for running our whole operation. And it's also a legal requirement. We are legally required to have meters on our electricity and gas supply. They have to be of a certain standard. The data has to be collected and processed within a certain time. And so we are required to have these arrangements in place. What we have at the moment is a sort of a rolling arrangement that works well with our current setup, but there are changes, which I'll come back to in a bit more detail, which means that we need to make some changes to how we manage our electricity meters going forward. So the primary purpose of electricity metering is, not surprisingly, is to measure the amount of electricity that we're using. And that's used for two purposes. It's used to settle the balance of the grid. So every half hour, the grid as a whole is balanced. The larger supplies, which could have an influence on the balance of the grid, are measured and reported every half hour. The smaller supplies at the moment are dealt with on a monthly or quarterly or even an annual basis. That's changing, I'll come back to that. It's also essential for our suppliers to work out how much power we've used so they can bill us accurately. And as my colleague will sort of mention shortly, sometimes they don't always get that right. So as I said before, at the moment, we have a mixture in that the larger electricity supplies have to be balanced on the grid every half hour, the smaller supplies less often. That is changing. There's an initiative called the market-wide half-hourly settlement, which in essence is changing everything to being half-hourly settled right down to the meter in your home. There is, as Councillor Fodor said, there is an appendix that, if you speak energy, explains it in a lot more detail, and if you don't speak energy, a layman's version of it, which basically sets out the change that's going on and the consequences this will have. Now, our current metering supply arrangements are based on two contracts, one for the half-hourly supply, one for the non-half-hourly supply, and we have two different suppliers for those. So the half-hourly supply is done through the sleeving arrangement with laser that we've mentioned to the committee a number of times. The non-half-hourly is also on the laser framework, but that's a more conventional arrangement with npower as our supplier. When it comes to the future, we are looking to move to a sleeved pool arrangement, which we've discussed with the committee from time to time. This would look to consolidate all our electricity supplies into one bigger contract, fed with a mixture of our own renewable generation and wider renewable generation that we're hoping to procure across the city. And there's a separate initiative tracking to let the tender for that sleeved pool. But one of the important things we need to make sure is that we are ready for a new supplier under the sleeve pool arrangement. So we are assuming nothing about who's going to win that contract. It could be one of our existing suppliers, but if it is one of our existing suppliers, then the other half of our meters will change supply. It's possible all our meters will change supplier. But under the market-wide half-hourly settlement arrangements, each supplier has been given a timetable to do their migration to the new system within an 18-month window starting from October. This means we can't be certain if the winning supplier under the sleeve pool arrangement has gone to market-wide half-hourly settlement early or is one of the later transit. So we have to be in a position where we're not excluding potential suppliers because we're not ready to deal with market-wide half-hourly settlement ourselves. This is why we're bringing forward these arrangements so that whatever happens in the sleeve pool tender, we've got a metering arrangement in place that's future ready. This has other benefits. So this gives us the opportunity to consolidate our contracts. Managing one big contract is not necessarily half the work of managing two smaller contracts, but it helps. We also have a number of issues with our current metering arrangement. A lot of our meters, we had a program about 10 years or so ago where we upgraded all our meters to automatic meters. And just to confuse you, our non-half-hourly meters, the smaller ones, can actually read data every half hour. They're just not required to do that to settle with the grid. Under market-wide half-hourly settlement, they will be required to do that. But we have, not a lot of them, but we have a number of problem meters that cause us trouble, and we think the new arrangements may help. And I was going to ask my colleague, Polly Brand, our Senior Account Manager, if she can give you sort of an idea of the sort of problems that we're having with our current meter setup.
Hello. Yes, I manage the electricity and gas contracts on the corporate estate and housing some schools. And a lot of my time is actually taken up with meter data issues. So I'm sure you see in the news the sort of headline-grabbing stories about people that suddenly get these massive bills from their suppliers I mean, if you can just multiply that 1,000 times or so, because we have a lot of meters. So in the case study that we've included in the pack, we've got one example which just illustrates how significant the associated cost can be. So you can quickly get a situation where due to a problem with meter data, lack of reads, and specific, difficulties around access to those meters, you can get massive swings in costs. So I've illustrated a situation where we're potentially looking at a big credit or a huge bill, and at the moment it's very difficult to access the meter. It's cordoned off. There's building works. It's difficult and dangerous to access. So without that data coming from the meter, we're unable to actually challenge bills or speak to the suppliers because we just can't provide the evidence about the actual usage for that meter. So it's also the time involved in actually dealing with disputes. The better the data you've got, the less time you're having to spend on sort of back office admin, and the more time you can spend actually managing energy and tackling carbon reductions, the better the data, the better you are at doing all of those things. Forecasting costs, budgeting, saving money. It all comes, it's a part and parcel with that good data that you get from the meters. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So yes, as Polly says, if we can improve our overall metering arrangements, it will certainly save us time, money and effort, which will give them better focus on managing down our bills and managing down our carbon. We've looked at a number of ways. We took a step back and looked at a number of different options for how we could provide our metering services. One we ruled out fairly quickly is buying our own meters. It is an option. We could go out and buy 1,200 meters. The problem then is we own them, we're responsible for them, we've got to maintain them, we've got to replace them. A metering service passes all that over to the meter operator, so we don't have to worry about the state of our meters. We just report the faults and they get fixed. We have, as I said, 2 rolling contracts, and we're looking for the opportunity to consolidate those, but also by re-tendering them, we're hoping to get a better price. Market-wide half-hourly settlement will bring some unknown additional costs. It's a more complex arrangement. It has way more data. Things like the reporting of that data happens more often. If at the moment, if you have a settlement from the time that you consume the data to the time that the bill's raised, suppliers have 14 months in which to sort out the data. Going forward, they'll have a week. So we've got to make sure that we've got everything in place to manage on that sort of scale. So we looked at the different contracting options that we thought would give us the opportunity to manage that scale of change. We think keeping our existing metering contracts isn't going to work. There's 2 different contracts. There'll be an arbitrary split in the pool of meters. It's not going to work. You can do this through the supply. You can add it to the supply contract, but that puts us one step removed from this, and I think particularly during the transition phase we need to be more in control of this. We looked at public sector frameworks. We seem to be operating a little bit ahead of the game here, and that none of the public sector frameworks are really talking about market-wide half-hourly settlement yet. They will in time, but not yet. So we think the best option is to actually go out and tender specifically for a customised service that we want to enable us to manage that transition at whatever point we feel the need to make the transition. We have discussed the contract length. We initially were looking to set this up on a 5-year contract, which is typical for the industry, but in discussing with committee members, we're now proposing we take that to 7 years. We haven't yet fully engaged with procurement about how we're going to run this. What we may do is look at getting quotes for a range of contract lengths and see how it works out as a value for money. But for the purposes of tonight, what we're asking for is approval for up to 7 years with a budget envelope of up to 1.1 million. And then we'll come back when we've had the bids. We'll talk to the committee chair and to our executive director about what we get back from the bids when we've got some real numbers. So the ask is that we have approval to run a tender for a metering supply contract and data collection contract for our electricity meters. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much for that. And as anyone who's checked their bills and their meters in the past knows, yes, being too far ahead or too far behind can really put you in the position of having given away money you ought to get back, or owing money that you hadn't budgeted for. So we appreciate the fact you're keeping an eye on all our bills, I think. This helps future-proof us, and you've got a recommendation we go for up to a 7-year metering contract, and it will give us better data. I think future-proofing what we do and being ready for our new proposal to have a virtual sleeve pool, which is progressing, would be useful. But if there are any questions from members, now's the time to ask them. Yeah, Councillor King.
Thank you very much for all your work on this. I think, as you might expect from Labour councillors, energy security, price security is really important to us, thinking about the fuel poverty that exists in the city and has done for a few years now. And in the paper, it does talk about how the metering half-hourly system does come with increased costs, and the anticipation of metering costs to rise roughly by 15%. It'd be good to know what that actually looks like in pounds and pence, and the expectation that this would be passed on to the customers. And does that include providing for our schools and our housing blocks, and just to kind of understand what the impact might be on those groups? Have we consulted with them? Is there other conversations ongoing with our residents and with our schools and any other groups that might be impacted by this? Thank you.
Broadly speaking, the 15% is about £150,000 more than we're spending at the moment over a 7-year contract. So that's what, about, trying to do the maths, about
20k a year.
20k a year, thank you. But I have to say there's a high degree of uncertainty around that cost. The suppliers we've engaged with, we've talked to our own existing meter operators, we've talked to the Major Energy Users Council. Suppliers have been extremely cagey about what their costs are going to be, and we think the only way we can flush out the real cost is to go to the market and say, right, quote for this. We're being cautious, and we're saying it's almost a worst case scenario, saying, well, let's say it's 50% above what we're currently at, but we're currently at a higher level than perhaps we could be because we're on a rolling contract. We think just simply by the act of going to a tender and bidding for a contract will in itself bring the prices down, so it may cancel out. In terms of passing on the cost, yes, you're absolutely right, this is embedded in the cost. I mean, all the groups you spoke about, bar possibly one, already pay this. It's part of the electricity bills that we already process. And we try and keep all our customers informed as to where we think the market is going. But it's hard to give them definitive figures until we've run the tender. The exception is the council house residents. We don't cover them. We cover the communal areas. But obviously any increase in the costs for the communal areas has to be passed on to the tenants in some form. So our colleagues over at HRA will factor that into the charges they make to individual houses and flats where there's communal supplies.
Could I just add?
Yes.
Today I had to complete a report for housing for the leaseholder electricity costs. So we've got about 700 or so electricity suppliers which are actually landlord supplies for HRI housing. And the problem with producing the reports is that some of these meters, they don't have, well, they're not adequately metered to provide the data. So essentially, I'm actually basing some of the report on estimated bills. And so I'm trying to make corrections based on best guess. And it would be fantastic if I could just say definitively, this is how much electricity you've used, this is what it costs for the year. That's the position we want to get to, so that will actually support the residents by providing good data and not just suppliers' best guess estimates, which can be a bit wildly out.
So we'd have more accurate bills with this system.
That's right, and we could also then do more analysis to analyse, any anomalies, any, unusual patterns of usage, which we could then challenge more quickly and effectively.
That's the point, is by having better data we can better manage it. I was just reminded, the electricity is only about 40% of an electricity bill. The remaining 60% is made up of a whole variety of charges, of which the metering is probably about 1 or 2%. Yeah, so in comparison, it's a relatively small element, but obviously all these small elements add up.
Okay, so and the 15% cost, that's of the metering itself, not of the overall bill.
Absolutely, yeah, 15% of the metering,
okay.
So 15% of 2% of the overall bill.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's our best estimate based on what intelligence we have been able to gather. We think the only way we'll know definitively is to go out there and get a quote.
Okay, thank you.
Were there any other questions about the report, or can we move on to the recommendations? Okay, I don't see any more. So I have to read out the recommendations. So you've gone through 4 options. You've recommended a particular approach, and the recommendations, therefore, are that the committee endorses this and authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration, in consultation with the Director of Finance and the Chair of the Environment and Sustainability Committee, that's me, to procure and award contracts, it says singular or plural, for electricity metering services and data services in line with the procurement routes and maximum budget envelopes outlined in the report. That's the first recommendation. And the second is, this authorises the Executive Director of Growth and Regeneration to invoke any subsequent extensions or variations specifically defined in the contracts being awarded up to the maximum budget envelope outlined in the report. And that's for up to 7 years, isn't it? So can we take those together, and can I put that to the committee as a recommendation? Yeah. Is someone happy to second that? Thank you, Councillor Weston. So it's been proposed and seconded that we take that together. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thanks very much. That's unanimous. So we've approved that report. We look forward to hearing how that goes. Thank you. Thanks. So we're going to move on to agenda item 8, which is about progress in reducing Bristol's carbon emissions. That's from page 39 in the committee papers to page 53, I believe. This is an update on the city's progress in reducing carbon emissions. Recall that a few months ago, the committee had a report on the council's own climate emissions and our decarbonisation of what's called the corporate estate. That's the council buildings. This is about what we know about what's been happening in the city in terms of cutting carbon emissions. Alex Minchell will introduce the report, and it's going to suggest we have an update report coming in a few months to look forward, but this is the progress to date with the city's own progress, which is the One City Climate Strategy, which is a partnership document. So over to you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Fodell. So, yes, this report was requested by the committee at the previous meeting, and it provides that update on the emissions and some of the high-level actions that have been taking place in the city to help reduce those emissions, and then to note that City Council officers are working on a new City Council action plan. Our current action plan runs up till the end of this year, and so in November we intend to bring a new action plan and have scheduling in some engagement with members as part of that process to bring forward that action plan. Thank you. So just in terms of the paper provides a summary of a longer appendix which provides a bit more detail. We know that, and it was referred to in public forum, that Bristol has long been a leader in the climate action, and that kind of is in response to and reflects the high levels of concern that citizens express about climate change in the city. And our quality of life survey regularly shows, for the last decade has shown, levels of concern, and very concerned, over 80% fairly consistently. And that concern is also shared by the scientific community, and the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the official UN body, proposed a recommendation in 2018 that the world needed to rapidly decarbonise, and that we needed to see reductions of about 45% of 2010 baselines by 2030. And there's going to be, I'm afraid there's going to be quite a few numbers and percentages and dates, so I'll try and make it as clear as possible. But that sort of 45% reduction over that 20-year period was what they felt was needed to really help to ensure the climate could stay within the sort of broadly safe levels. And as a response to that, in this chamber, some of the members here were part of that declaration of the climate emergency, because it was supported unanimously by all the members at that time. And that then resulted in work going on to develop the One City Climate Strategy and also the City Council's own climate programme. And part of why we're doing this is because clearly it offers benefits for the global climate and all that entails for ourselves. But it also generates more immediate and more local benefits in terms of improving air quality, improving warm homes and more energy efficient homes, improved public health. It is generating a huge number of jobs, and the CBI recently reported that clean energy and the environmental technology sector is growing rapidly much faster than the general economy. It's also, we just had a big item on fuel bills, and actually the energy savings that the city has made over the last decade, the last 20 years rather, actually mean that if we hadn't made those savings, we'd be paying something like £300 million a year extra on those energy bills flowing out of the city to those energy companies. That's about £800 per household. And so we are reaping the benefits both locally and in terms of our improved environment, improved health, and reduced costs, as well as contributing to that bigger global picture. And the City Council has played a very substantial role in some of that decarbonisation. In terms of setting out, we set out in December the emission reduction we're making on our own corporate emissions, which are a very small percentage of the total city emissions, but the City Council's approach has been to kind of lead by example. And so that's we're forecasting, if all the bits of contracting and arrangements that Mr. Gray here is working on, the sleeved pool and other arrangements, come into play, then we're looking at about a 90% reduction over our baseline year. So that's a very substantial improvement. But it's really important that we're then also playing a much wider role in the city. And apologies, in drafting this paper, I somehow deleted 2 or 3 paragraphs that are in the appendix in more detail, but are missing from the cover report. So my apologies. And those are really about the work that we're doing through the Bristol City Leap joint venture, which is already investing about £51 million in projects in the city as part of the wider 5-year business plan. That's about 500 million. And that's a massive investment, is already creating local jobs and improvements in the city. But also the investment that's being made by government through the Mayoral Combined Authority into the city's transport system. And we're seeing, I think it's currently about £500 million of programme across the west of England into more sustainable transport. And that's level of investment that we're seeing now is sort of unprecedented in recent years, and is both reducing carbon emissions, improving health, but also improving the kind of quality of life for people. And I think that's important that we kind of remind ourselves of those multiple benefits that climate action brings for us. But as well as operating on our own operations through our direct emissions, the ways in which we can enable emission reduction in the city through our functions like energy management or transport, we're also working to try and facilitate action by a very wide range of partners, kind of, if you like, well beyond what a city council might do if it was doing the minimum. and that includes things like working with communities on developing their own community climate action plans, and several members of the committee have been involved in that process and supporting their implementation, but also then trying to facilitate large-scale private sector investment into the city and the region through the currently being established Green Growth West Fund that the combined authority is now progressing, which but began in conversation with discussions and project within the City Council. And that aims to raise £100 million, first raise hopefully this before Christmas. And that then starts to bring large-scale finance into the region, into the city, to create jobs and deliver projects for everybody. And so we're working at kind of all scales, from the local community organisations and supporting individual projects through to citywide and now region-wide initiatives to try and deliver those benefits. But also, I think the work that Bristol has done has had a national effect, both in terms of declaring the climate emergency and then the 300 or more local authorities that declared emergencies after that. And there are climate change teams operating in councils across the country that did not exist in 2018, and because of their declarations of climate emergency. So I think that the impact it's hard to demonstrate, but it's definitely there. And so we think that's been hugely impactful. And so the final section then turns to what about the emission reduction? And broadly speaking, our emissions are we're talking now then focusing on what we call the territorial emissions, which is the emissions from electricity, gas and transport use within Bristol. There's a whole other section of emissions which we're not able to measure so well, which is what we call the consumption-based emissions, all the goods and services that we buy and our travel in a more global environment. But if we focus on the data, which the territorial emissions, as we call them, it's broadly in three bundles. About a third of it, a bit more than a third, is from transport. About a third, just short of a third, is from domestic properties, and the other third is from non-domestic activities. And the report appendix sets out that in a bit more detail. And then what we've seen, we've been having a consistent national data set on this since 2005, and the last year of that data is 2023. So there's a little bit of a lag in the data, and that was just issued a couple of weeks ago. So it's as hot off the press as this data can be. And so what we've seen there is a 56% reduction overall in emissions in the city. So we've more than halved the emissions as a collective effort from half of the city. And it's about a 62% per capita reduction in emissions, because the population of the city has grown in those 20 years. That compares to about a 46% and a 52% nationally. So we're about 10% higher on a per person or a total basis than we see nationally. And that's true also when we compare ourselves with the core cities group, where the difference isn't quite so great. So the core cities group being other major cities in the UK that we often compare ourselves against. And again, we've been able to make reductions ahead of most of those, and we have continued to have the lowest emissions of that group of cities. And so we're forecasting that emissions by 2030, those territorial emissions, so those electricity, gas and transport emissions, will be about 60 to 65% lower than our baseline year over the next 5 years. And that's what we're sort of forecasting out to then. And that, we think, so that's where we're sort of forecasting for 5 years' time. I'm very happy to take any further questions that members may have.
Thanks very much for that, and some really interesting sort of experiences to date. While it's great to think we're doing better than most authorities in England and compared to core cities, we know we've got a lot further to go. But I think the benefits that you've outlined, the wider benefits from helping residents, helping communities, helping local businesses and initiatives are really important. And we're starting to see that private investment flowing. So today I saw the replacement of a heat main by the City Leak joint venture that's upgrading the heating systems for blocks of flats in Bristol. And the private investment that's going to flow through the Green Growth West Fund is really positive. And I know Bristol played quite a key part in persuading the West of England to set up that £100 million investment fund for the region. So we used to say that energy was an issue where money left cities, it left local authorities, and now we're seeing ways we can reduce the cost and keep the value and the benefits in the city. So I hope we can keep doing that. Are there any questions about the report from the committee? Councillor Finch, then Councillor Russell. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for this report. It was really, really interesting to sort of see all that data laid out. I found it really interesting, so yeah, really appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, obviously it references the 2018 IPCC report about all the dangers of passing 1.5 degrees, and I remember reading that report when it came out. And so I just wanted to say, obviously, I don't know if everybody here is aware, but 2024 is the first year that we went past that. Not the same as necessarily going past it on a global average over a number of years, but it's really scary, and the trajectory for the next few years is not looking good. So, yeah, I guess sort of it's fantastic that Bristol was the first city to declare a climate emergency, as Harriet mentioned. But yeah, 100%, you know, wanted to sort of highlight the need to keep pushing, and keep finding all the opportunities we can. So I guess on that note, my question, I have lots of questions, but I'll try and just keep it to a couple for now. But in terms of Bristol City Council's Climate Emergency Action Plan for 2025 to 2027, you said in the report how that's going to be looking at all the different potential opportunities, and I wondered whether sort of councillors or who's able to feed into that, because I think, you know, the more ideas we can feed into that, the better in a way. So yeah, I guess that's the first question.
We're arranging a session for early September to enable members of the committee to feed into that. So we'll have a sort of workshop session as a key opportunity, and then we're also scheduling a kind of briefing on the existing action plan, which I'm hoping to be able to just issue to the committee, so that obviously it's holiday season, tricky to get people together, so that people have got some background reading ahead of that workshop, so they can understand what has been done, where areas where we might be having some more difficulties, and then therefore what some of those new opportunities might be for the next phase of the action plan.
So just to clarify, you'll remind us what's in the current plan. We can identify that, you know, the issue's already been covered, and then we can feed in later as well what suggestions we have in terms of a revision and new issues, gaps that need to be filled, and so on. Okay, thanks for that. Did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I would keep it to one for now. But I guess, I guess one idea would be different. You know, looking at different ways of funding these sorts of improvement, and obviously we've started local investment for the first time, which is really exciting. I wonder if there's more we could do there, but also thinking about recently the crowdfunder to buy that Turner art piece, wondering whether we can also, rather than just having public investment, knowing how much of a priority the climate emergency and a concern it is for the people of Bristol, whether we could also do crowdfunders to get sort of, you know, essentially grant funding that can fund certain projects around Bristol, maybe even the community climate action plans. I wonder if there could be a link there. Yeah.
Yes, so we're actively looking at what the funding arrangements to support some of the community climate action plans might be and some of the projects they're in. Recently, June possibly, we had a launch of a prospectus in effect that set out what some of those some of those projects that might be investable for a larger scale investors, but we're also conscious that many of them can be invested in at a range of different levels, either for return or for not, just for the benefit of doing it. So we're looking at a kind of wide range of things, Yeah,
you did bring copies of the Community Climate Action Prospectus for committee members, because we mentioned that to previous meeting. But yeah, that's a really good reminder. I've got a series of people queuing up to ask questions. So Councillor Russell, and then there'll be Councillor Weston, I think Councillor Tate, and then Councillor Dudd, and then Councillor Kent. So over to you.
Yeah, just a couple of small things. First, I was going to say about the sort of pie chart. It's interesting to see how big of a section transport is, and kind of a reminder of how we need to engage with businesses in the city, like coach companies, First Bus, and make sure that, I mean, first of all, that they have electric vehicles, but also that we're incentivizing people to travel sustainably. And then I was also just going to say that it was really interesting to see the different emissions per ward. It would be really good to see that for every ward in the city, and potentially for that to be made public as well. So yeah, people could reflect on their responsibility. And that could even link with Abby's point about making donations. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so on the transport front, yes, obviously there's a lot of work going on to promote the sustainable transport things, but also specific things such as the grants that the City Council has been able to make available through the implementation funding for the Clean Air Zone, which is not intentionally about carbon dioxide emissions, but has enabled the electrification of some business vehicles and the like. And you also now have seen the big new green buses around the city, which are the first tranche of the electric fleet that are coming into the fleet through government and First Bus funding. So yeah, I hope that's a very exciting development, I think. And your second point, I'm sorry, I didn't. The wards, yes. So thank you, David. The data that we refer to there is in the public domain, and so you can just put any ward in anywhere in the UK, and it will give you the data. And we just happen to put the two top and bottom ones.
I'll have a look for that. Thank you.
Yeah, just to add about the new fleet of buses that First Group have. So I was lucky enough to be at the launch with the leader of the council, and half the fleet that First Group are now running has been electrified from their Hengrove depot, and the other half, which is from their Lawrence Hill depot, will be electrified. We're really lucky because, unfortunately, it sounds like the funding source for that has now ended for local bus renewal, which is disappointing. And the report does highlight some of the constraints that councils and communities have, and access to those funds and sort of obstacles that there are to doing that. Will slow the action that takes place. So we're lucky we've been able to benefit from that in time. That's Councillor Weston. You were next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just looking at Table 2, so this is Figure 4, Bristol emissions by domain. I realise this is probably hard to assess. There's only so many hours in the day and all the rest of it. You see substantial totals in industry and commercial on the CO2 produced, so that's dropped. Out of curiosity, do we have any way of knowing? Because over this time, we've seen a lot of commercial areas in Bristol go to residential or anything else. Is it because the industries and commercial enterprises are getting cleaner, or have actually they just moved over the border to South Gloss and we've officially exported our CO2, or have they moved overseas entirely and we've really exported our CO2? Is there any way to assess that?
Probably.
If I just created a living nightmare for you with that question.
So I think if you were to look at that picture for South Gloucestershire, and we can do that, I think we'd see, or indeed any of the West of England or the UK, because we have benefit this comparable data. I think you'd see the similar picture in terms of that decarbonisation of the commercial sector, and that is partly because of the decarbonisation of the electricity supply on the grid, and therefore all businesses using electricity have got greener because they're using green electricity whether they choose to or not. So I think that will be, my instinct would say that's the biggest factor in that decarbonisation of the commercial sector within Bristol and elsewhere. We could look at has the number of jobs changed significantly in Bristol in particular sectors. I'm not aware of major transitions in that. obviously the manufacturing sector, which is I guess the area that might be most significant, has remained fairly stable in terms of the percentage of the economy that represents, I think. But it's an area I can go and look at, but it's not. I don't know that the jobs data so well.
No problem.
Yeah,
Thank
we'll
you,
have a look. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for that. And obviously, Bristol does have a substantial renewable energy sort of expert sector, including, I think, the legal work for a lot of renewables is carried out by companies in the city. We've been told, but something to look further into. Councillor Tate, you had a question.
It was just to say, obviously Bristol, we signed up to the Just Transition Declaration, and I know that you guys have been really proactive in signing up, and with the fact that this is being renewed and being looked at, we're at a different starting point than what we were last time when you were doing this. So I suppose my question to you is, although the meeting will be set for us in September, will you be consulting with the community climate action partners, and what process will you be taking, given that we've now signed up to the Just Transition Declaration and having that weaved within the document, rather than it being like a separate thing?
Yeah, so absolutely incorporating the principles is part of that, the new drafting of that action plan. So in principle, yes, absolutely. The specifics of consulting with the community climate action groups, we are reflecting on what is in the action plans. I haven't at this point planned to consult the groups, but let me go away and take that thought away and talk to colleagues about how, if and how we might do that.
Just because I know they're planning on having the board carry on, which I know that you attended before, to ask some of those questions. And there are some different case studies of where the Just Transition Declaration, had a look at what other mechanism was working. And so I suppose it's like comparing the two. So there are some tools available now, whereas last time there perhaps wasn't, because it was early stages. So I suppose my question back is just to make sure we're thinking about that as we go ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Councillor Dodd.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just a couple of questions, but first of all, I just wanted to say thank you to yourself, Alex, and your team for all the hard work over the years. There's obviously a lot of success here. Obviously, we've mentioned there's a lot more that needs to be done, and it's good to see all the partnership work paying dividends. So you've got the one city approach, and also City Leap starting to deliver now. So the first question is kind of on that finance question. Obviously, we kind of leading the way as a city on that. Do you see us influencing other locations in the country on that? And of course, we're also in a European network. So I just wonder if other cities are now sort of kind of using the City Leap example or another type of financial example to deliver more investment. And then the second question, for years and years, heat was the biggest part of the footprint in the city. And it seems to be sort of broken down a bit more now in this report. So it just references heating by gas. And that's, is it 30-something%? So I just wondered what's happened with around heat. Because is it still the biggest emitter, or is it now transport?
So on the last point, I do just need to look at the data in a bit more detail. My instinct is that probably just looking at the pie chart roughly, I would expect that transport is still the bigger one, and that gas consumption and as the predominant source of heat in the city is declining faster than transport because of energy efficiency measures. But it's still it will be smaller, but they'll be of similar scales of magnitude, and are therefore the two key areas where we're trying to work, both through the sustainable transport work and through City Leap and the work that our partners Vattenfall are doing in building out the heat network. And so they've got plans for £220 million of investment in the heat network over the next few years to try and take some of those properties off the gas replace their gas boilers with heat pumps, such as the one in Castle Park, which is running off the heat in the harbour, to provide zero carbon heating to more and more houses to replace those gas boilers. Because at the end of the day, this is what we need to replace gas boilers with electric heating through heat pumps and stop burning and replace fossil fuels in vehicles with electricity. So it's both those things. It's both transport and heat, and both using less heat by having more efficient homes and offices, and replacing the source of that heat from gas to sustainable sources. On your question about other cities, there is a huge amount of interest from cities both in the UK and on the continent, and in fact in America, about the City Leap model. And we are part of a project supported by government to work with York and North Yorkshire, and colleagues Helen Reid has been working as part of trying to transfer some of the learning that we've undertaken and the experience of developing City Leap to share that with York and North Yorkshire. But I know that we've had meetings with Manchester and Glasgow, who both come to visit Bristol to understand what we've done. Whether they come up with whether they decide that's exactly the right model for them, it's absolutely will be obviously down to them, but they will be benefiting from the experience that we've had, and to some extent the inspiration that we might have given them. But yeah, there's a huge amount of interest across the world.
Yes, certainly we know there's been a sort of sharing experience, but and also offering sort of advice with cost recovery, because obviously we could spend a lot of time, or officers could spend a lot of time helping everyone else, but we primarily want them to be sort of working here. But they've supported quite a few other authorities, there's no doubt. Could I just add, because you talk about heating, we'll have to increasingly think about cooling in terms of climate change and heat waves affecting the city, and that needs to be part of the strategy more and more going forward, doesn't it? That sources of cooling that don't cause climate change, so not burning gas, not wasting energy by cooling, will be just as important in the future, because it's just as significant and can be more of a hazard to health, can't it? Councillor Kent, you had a question. I don't know if there was anyone after that, but do indicate if you had one. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. 2 short points and 2 short questions, if that's okay. I mean, one, thank you for this report. It's really, really good. I love all the numbers. I think that really helps us understand where we're at. Obviously, if we want to be moving forward, we need the government to accelerate decarbonisation of our electricity grid. The fact we have so much gas being used to produce electricity is what is costing us all in our electricity bills, and the sooner we can move to more renewable electricity, which is far, far cheaper, the better. Another quick point, though, is if we want to tackle the transport issue, we need to do far more as a city to help people transition to electric vehicles. Obviously, I'm lucky. I can park my electric vehicle off-road, so I can charge it easily and cheaply, but many, many people in this city don't have that option, and we need to find ways to help them do that if we want people to be able to move to electric vehicles faster, because they will also find that they are cheaper than using carbon. Quick question then, because I was slightly confused about this. In Appendix A, under 16, it refers to waste producing 6% of carbon emissions. But when we look at the individual ward readouts, waste is sort of counts normally for under 1%. I was just sort of wondering, is that just a difference in methodology, or is there something else going on there?
Yes, it's absolutely the methodology. So in the paragraph 16 and the pie chart there, we're looking at the effects in Bristol of disposal of management of waste and its disposal in the city, or by the city. In the other model is looking at the wider impacts of the waste generated. So they are using different methodologies. I must admit, I don't have the details of the CSE model. But I do know having been produced by the Centre for Sustainable Energy, it should be a fairly robust model. So I think with the consumption-based emissions are incredibly challenging to quantify because there's a lot of estimates and proxies used in that data. So I think you should take it as a general picture rather than as a precise definition of it, because also then, and these are of course averages, so they will then vary by individual, by household, by individual choices.
Thanks. Okay, well that probably means I want to be a little bit more fairer to the chair then when I point out that his ward is the most polluting area in the city by resident.
I blame the councillors.
Bit harsh. But I think it does raise an issue, which there is a polluter divide in this city. Now, admittedly, that may be connected to deprivation, but at the same time, we've got to recognise those that have money are also probably producing most of the pollution. And, you know, we've got to sort of double that challenge and make sure that people realise that just doing a little bit of recycling isn't enough. And they need to look about also their level of consumption, because there's other parts of the city which are producing substantially less pollution than certain parts of the city. Having said that, I take on board that we should be careful around those figures. And I actually had looked up my ward before I said this, by the way, and we were just under Bristol average, so we're on the right side of it. Thank you, Chair. I will look at where there's recycling rate.
Can I pick up? You raised electric vehicles firstly, and obviously consumption secondly. Just to let members know if they weren't aware, I've been working with the chair of the Transport and Connectivity Committee, because we know we need better ways to clean up transport emissions, and there's work underway right now to make electric vehicle charging easier and more widely available, especially where it's needed most. And that's houses with no driveways, charging that could be attached to lampposts, which might be overnight charging, and charging that could be crossing pavements, which we've pushed hard to make sure we pilot a scheme for people who could lay a cable across flush with the pavement, so there's no trip hazard, in order to gain access to charging when they have parking available near them, which should be possible at some point when a vehicle needs charging. So we're working on spreading that charging network and access to lower cost charging as quickly as possible in the city. You're absolutely right about consumption emissions, and there are those less able to pay and having different amounts of impact and smaller consumption, and there are those who are able to pay and have higher impact and more waste. And we need to find ways that help change those patterns, support those able to pay, to encourage them to switch to less wasteful habits, and to support those who have low consumption and might need access to more things, such as tackling fuel poverty and so on. So we need to do both as a city. And for instance, I think it was about 18 months ago, we had 2 heat pump trials, one for those in rented housing, one for those in the able to pay sector in private housing, because we need to target different solutions to different people in ways that work. And so we've been doing that. Was there anything you want to add to those points?
Yes, I was just going to make the point that a lot of the data on consumption-based emissions is drawn from spending. And that's an obvious way to do it. It does have the limitation that it can identify whether that money is being spent on food, on vegetables, probably quite granular, but it can't tell whether that is a locally grown organic carrot from the local veg box scheme, or whether that's a air-freighted Kenyan French bean. That pound will still have the same carbon value attached to it in the data. So I think it is important that people reflect on their individual actions and how they use their money and that this isn't necessarily a description of any individual person in that sense.
I've got Councillor Tate. Did you have a second question? Then Councillor King, and that's... Oh, and then... Okay, final question from Councillor Crawford.
It was just to say that what we're not very good at is showing examples. So we talked about how other cities are starting to like ask and about your process, but there's still the idea that in order to get to a just transition, that means it's going to be slow and really expensive. When actually we can still go fast and fair. And I think Bristol's done a really good job of showing that with the different initiatives that we've got going. Obviously, there's always room for improvement, and it is a journey. But as we're looking at this refresh, you know, the universities, there's different researchers involved. It would be really good to try and highlight whilst we're digesting what we've done well, what we possibly might want to improve on, and in that process that we have that researched at that same time. And just to say, especially because we've signed up, and I know I keep harping on about it, but Hartcliffe and Withywood have one of the lowest footprints in the area, but it's making sure that communities like that one aren't impacted the worst by the climate crisis and by the changes that might happen with then the, you know, it implementing and hitting them harder. So it's really about making sure that there is consultation done, not just on the areas with the higher footprint of what can they do, but equally how has getting to net zero, how is that in the actions that we've taken, how has that impacted those communities? And so listening to that, so we've got some learning moving forward.
Thanks for that. Yeah, very, very important, fast and fair. Councillor King?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to quickly come back on Councillor Kent's observation of the government. And, you know, I think with clean energy being one of the government's 5 missions and putting 13.2 billion into the Warm Homes programme, you know, the acceleration towards net zero is a clear statement of intent, and one that I think has been welcomed by industry and experts alike. I just wanted to ask a question. I'm not sure this is for Alex or Councillor Fodor. We've talked about domestic heating accounting for about approximately a third of Bristol's emissions. But recently the Homes and Housing Committee has just signed off on selling council houses that are costly to bring up to an EPC energy efficiency rating of C. Purely from an environmental perspective, is that a good idea?
I'm happy to comment on that. There are houses that have been neglected for so long that they are very, very poor condition and will be very expensive to bring up to standard. We know that. The idea that they could be done up by the council would be an extremely expensive undertaking using the capital programme. If we can find partners who will do them up and make them available without using council capital, that could be the best way to improve them. What we have to do is find the right way to get them upgraded and the right way to get them back into use if they're unfit at present. And so council capital is very limited. You'll know that the council recently the government recently cancelled access to the public sector decarbonisation scheme. It's funding renewable energy, but stopping us actually cutting our own emissions as a council. Now, that doesn't affect council housing, but it does affect council buildings. And we need to find access to capital that will help solve the problems in the city. And they're not going to be solved by the council alone. So if we have investors who can take those on, and there are companies who are buying up low condition, poor condition housing, they're available. I've met them at events nationally. They will take on unfit housing, make it fit, and let it, especially at low, affordable rents. Actually, that could be the best solution. So we need to look at all those options, I think. I don't know if you want to add anything to that. Does that answer your question?
Can I just follow up from that? So as a resident who is a council tenant, if I was told that my home was too expensive to retrofit, but I grew up in that area and I had connections in that area and I might have, it could have been that someone else lived in that home before me, I would feel like I'm being penalised from getting to net zero because of where I live. And also, we do know that most of those properties are in quite affluent areas, which we're seeing like increasingly less council homes being built or and space to be built in. So actually what that projects is, you know, that less and less council homes will be in those specific wards, which then really segregates people. And that's just a reflection on what people have said, and they're really worried about that. And so it's an example of why I'm saying make sure that that decision really is rooted in the Just Transition Declaration, because actually what you're doing is you're deciding that based on getting that home retrofitted, that because it's going to cost too much money, that then that person can't live in that home anymore or in that area.
Well, this committee can't discuss the house building programme because we don't have all the information, but we do have local lettings policies as well, which help prioritise local residents. So I think we should try and answer those questions, but I don't think we can answer them here in this meeting right now.
But I think because we have the environment element, that actually when those decisions are made, that actually maybe it could be something that is brought to our agenda is quite light. So maybe it could be something that we're asked to consult on when they made the decision.
Yeah. Okay. We'll try and get more information about how we upgrade housing. I'll see what's available. And finally, Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to go back to what we were saying as well about the more affluent areas having higher emissions. I think Councillor Tate already touched on it. Often the most affluent in our city tend to be more shielded from the worst impacts of climate change as it is. So I think not only do we need to think about how we're going to reduce the emissions of our more affluent wards, we need to be thinking about how we're going to target our mitigation strategies as well. So my kind of question / statement is, you know, we're looking ahead at our future decarbonisation plans. We've got to think about as well the intensity of the climate crisis as we progress. Will that be a part of that work, or will that be a separate body of work that we'll be looking at in the future?
Yeah, can I just clarify, when you said mitigation, that's usually cutting emissions. Adapting is responding to the changing climate?
If that's the terminology these days, then that's fine. But
yes.
I
hope that will be part of it. Can you let us know?
Yeah,
climate jargon, yeah. If adaptations, is that going to be part of that body of work, or?
Yes, it will. It will. So currently our existing action plan is very light on adaptation measures, and we're trying to incorporate more in the current plan. And one of the pieces of work we did a couple of years ago was to try and understand, this is the question you're asking about, which communities are most vulnerable particularly to heat stress, and that was the thing that we looked at from the heat waves that we've just experienced. And so using about 40 different layers of data, we have, if you look on our website, you'll find the Keep Bristol Cool tool, which gives you a map of the city and recognises that some parts of the city will get hotter because of the urban heat island effect and because of density and other centrality and other factors. Some buildings within those neighbourhoods are more likely to get hotter because of their characteristics, lots of south-facing windows, poor insulation, etc. And then some people are to be more vulnerable to the same rises in temperature. And so we're able to layer those questions about neighbourhood, about properties, and about people to understand where the most vulnerable people are living in the city. And the map, in many ways, isn't hugely surprising in that sense, but we're using that to start to target our interventions. So, for example, it's one of the prioritisation criteria in the tree strategy, is an attempt to say, well, if we're going to plant trees to help manage the heat island effect in the city, these are the areas where they would be most beneficial. It doesn't mean, of course, it's therefore easy to put them there, but it does help us to focus on those areas first. And so similarly, with measures such as trying to provide cool spaces for heat waves, we are working with community organisations in neighbourhoods that are most vulnerable on that map to try and provide, look at can we provide relief spaces that can be kept cool in hot weather for people.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much. That's really helpful. And yeah, a reminder that we've got to look forward to sort of new challenges as well as the ones we were already sort of dealing with due to heat and flooding, of course, as well, increasingly. So I'm glad there's been a wide-ranging discussion. We can move on to the recommendations now. I have to read them out and then see if we can take those. So we've been asked, the Committee for Environment and Sustainability should firstly note the report and the progress in reducing the city's carbon emissions and the key actions being undertaken by the Council to contribute to this. And secondly, note that work is underway to develop an updated Bristol City Council Climate Emergency Action Plan for 2025 to 27, setting out the Council's contribution to reducing city greenhouse gas emissions and improving climate resilience, and that this plan is scheduled to be presented to the committee in November. Are we happy to take those together? And do I have a seconder for those? Councillor Finch, thank you very much. So could you all indicate your support for those recommendations? In favour, please raise a hand. That is unanimous. Thanks very much. So we've approved the report and we look forward to the November report bringing back the action plan looking forward and reminding you that we suggested including the recommendation from Public Forum on the fossil fuel treaty. Thanks very much. So we're moving forward to Agenda 9, Item 9, Quarterly Performance Report, pages 54 to 58. This is a regular report. It's looking at Q4 of the last year. I'm going to hand over to Peter. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So the format is very similar, as the Chair indicated, in relation to, and the content in terms of this is the end of year, so end of Q4, so at the end of March 25, which provides detail in terms of the progress of indicators linked to this committee across the business plan, priority metrics and city outcomes. In overall, there is a positive position in relation to a large proportion of the actions and KPIs being on track or completed. The report does bring out 5 areas of note in relation to some indicators which have either performed slightly worse or haven't yet been achieved. Just wanted to bring out a couple of examples in there in relation to, and I guess this links to the task and finish group work we're doing in relation to recycling and waste, where we've seen an overall direction of waste growth, but we have seen a reduction per person, but not a significant reduction. And our recycling rate is worse than target, but still above the national average. But as we know, we're having conversations through task and finish in relation to how do we increase recycling. But that was an indicator which we know has been stagnant for several years in the absence of any significant service change or education. The indicator linked to fly tipping, which I know we've discussed at committee on several occasions, is one which we do want to include within a review in terms of how we record. So rather than just measuring fly tips that are recorded but also removed, to look at particularly those that are just reported. And we've seen that we haven't seen the reduction as we had expected at the start of the year or had hoped, with an increase in relation to fly tips, particularly on council land. And reference to the waste strategy, which was a concept that we built into a KPI. However, the work through the task and finish group in relation to our future approach to waste minimisation and recycling will help inform our future approach. I'll hand back to the Chair if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you. And just remembering that we've improved the facility for reporting fly tipping, and that has led to better data, hasn't it? But it also means it's easier for people to give a report with a picture and a location. So it's cut duplications, but it might have increased the amount of reporting. Is that right?
That's fair. I think we have, but at the same time, we know from visual audits or what we see on the street, there is an increase of fly tipping, and that's something. But you're right in terms of being able to improve the reporting now, but also moving forward to make it easier. Yes.
Still something important to tackle. Councillor Weston, did you have a question?
More of a comment. I mean, I was thinking of withholding my powder, but then we got onto fly tipping, so I can't not. My issue on fly tipping is I would love to see a breakdown of how quickly the council removes fly tipping from parkland and roads, and then how quickly it removes it from housing land. Because I think anyone here who's dealt with trying to get any fly tipping removed from housing land would know what a complete nightmare it is. I mean, we're approaching an anniversary in my ward. I mean, we're looking forward to putting a little candle on the fly tip, and maybe one day it'll have its own 10th birthday and we'll wave it off to school. But housing land at the moment, you cannot get fly tipping removed in anything short of about 4 or 5 months, and that's just reality.
Noted. It is a challenge, working closely with our housing colleagues in relation to ensuring that we can repurpose resources which is coordinated through Bristol Waste in relation to level of resource needed to respond quickly. If it has gone on for so long in a location, then if you're not getting it removed, please don't hesitate to contact the client team, i.e. myself or Ken Lawson, to intervene if that's required, because 4 to 5 months isn't acceptable.
Yeah, well, Fitchett Walk then is for you. But with the greatest respect, this I think affects every single councillor across the entire city, and we've been asking for this to happen for months. And removing the fly tipping from parks and highways works very well. I've got no issue there. Sometimes it's done the same day. Housing, it's complete chalk and cheese, and the residents do not recognise the differential between why 1 foot away from it, if it's over here, it's housing and they can't touch it. It's over here, they can remove it in a day. They don't get that. So if that could be the top of a work programme somewhere, that would be lovely.
Will do.
Maybe we can make sure that's part of it. We get a periodic report about progress with waste issues. Let's make sure we get some more information on that. Thank you. Councillor Tudd.
Right, yeah, thanks. Just a couple of things, and also to back up what Councillor Weston's said about HRA land. The sort of level of service you get is completely different if you complain, as he says, about a fly tip on HRA land compared to normal land. So I think we need a one council approach to how we deal with fly tips, really. And I think one of the responses I've got from housing officers is they kind of want to wait until it's worth their while to spend the money to get waste cleared. So it's almost allowing it to build up before it gets to a level where it's, it makes sense to clear it. So I just don't think that's probably the best way to deal with it. Waste attracts waste, isn't it? So I think, we need to bring that back in line. I was just wondering, in future, if we can have some information about enforcement as well. The number of FPNs that we've issued around fly tipping or littering, any prosecutions that we've taken. Because obviously we've only got like one bit of the story here, haven't we? Because it may be that everybody's been issued a fine that's dropped the tonnage that we've listed here, but I suspect probably not. But it'd be nice to see those figures. And just one other thing, has there been a pay settlement yet in the waste company? Is that still on, negotiations still ongoing, or
it's been resolved between the company and their employees? But yeah, that's a matter. As you know, the shareholder is not this committee. We just get the service from the waste contract. But it has been resolved, and I was talking to the managing director. He's been able to get the agreement on that, as far as I understand, which is good news, of course. In terms of fixed penalty notices and enforcement, we did get a report to all members, I think to all councillors, recently, a few months ago, on waste issues from the street scene and sort of team dealing with fly tipping and waste. Maybe it's time to ask them if they can give us another report that will come to members, because there is enforcement work. There are penalty notices and prosecutions, but maybe we need to make sure we make all councillors aware that this is tackled and it is clamped down wherever possible by the enforcement team. So let's ask for that. Yeah. Thanks. If there are no further questions, Oh yeah, Councillor Tate, go ahead.
I said that I would raise it. I did have a resident say that the Fix My Street app, so when you report something, that sometimes the period of time for things to actually be actioned takes a while, yet it will look as though it's been actioned on the app because it's been passed on to the other person. So there's clearly like a communication piece around what that reporting app does, and like timescale, or like there's a piece missing where it can be like, even if it showed it's been reported to this person and this is the expected wait time. So like, because otherwise it can be quite disempowering if you've reported something online and then it says that it's been dealt with, but then you go there and it's not been dealt with, and it can be discouraging then for service users moving forward. So I just wanted to raise that as feedback.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Remember that is a third-party app. We've been able to improve some aspects of it, like the better location for fly tipping, but we do need to explain that, and we need to try and work with the provider to get a message that makes sense to the user.
Yeah, because obviously that's a service we're using.
Yes,
and
you're
also
right.
then we want to, so like as the ward councillor, knowing that does that in that way, I'm able to feed that information back. But yeah, just to managing expectations, but also so that we can encourage more people to use it.
Well, you're absolutely
Especially
right.
in wards like Hartcliffe and Wiffywood, where reporting rates are low anyway, and people already have a lot of distrust around reporting.
Yeah, thanks for raising that. It's I think it's a sort of ongoing issue between the council and the app, but it's very helpful, but not in every way, and we need to improve that. Yeah, sure. Okay, if there was no more sort of questions, we will obviously be getting further performance reports and linked to the new council business plan. So there might be some updating of the performance indicators. We've been asked to note the report, so if I can suggest we note the performance against the business plan relevant to this committee, including the issues raised and measures to address performance issues to be implemented by relevant services. That's firstly. And secondly, to note there is a process underway to refresh the corporate strategy and the related KPIs, the key performance indicators. The chairs of each committee have been briefed about this to enable all policy committees to help shape the KPIs they receive each quarter. And obviously, if you have suggestions, please get in touch. So can we agree to those two recommendations to notes 1 and 2? I'm going to propose those. Will someone second that so that we note that?
Yep, seconded.
Thanks, Councillor King. Could we then ask the committee to note it as per the recommendations set out? Everyone in agreement? Thanks. I see. Yep, see nodding. Thank you very much. So we move on to agenda item 10 on page 59 onwards, the period 2 finance report. Back to you.
Thanks, Chair. So this report is it's an extract from the report for the council that went to Strategy and Resources Committee earlier in July. So you'll note that there is quite a lot of information in the first half of the report relating to the council's financial position at P2, forecast period 2. We, as a council, have just concluded period 3. So pleased to say, and I'll come on to it shortly, there's been positive movement in the right direction for us as a committee in relation to P3. So this is looking backwards at P2, period 2. That was conducted in May. So there's quite a lot of detail in the report breaking down the position linked to ring fence accounts, general fund, dedicated school grants, etc., which don't directly relate to this committee, but a decision been made that all committees will receive this report for information and context, with the report then breaking down in relation to specifically the revenue and the capital budgets that relate to the relevant committee. In our case, under Appendix 7, there's a breakdown of the budget and forecast for waste, sustainable city and energy programme. So I'm sure you'll be familiar with these further to working this through last year also. Currently on the revenue position at P2, there was a pressure of nearly 1.3 million linked to energy in terms of the energy price and the demand not reducing as we went into budget setting into this year. Pleased to say that at P3 there was a forecasted position which was better by nearly £300,000, which is positive. And as a service, further mitigations that we're working through in relation to addressing the heat imbalance, for example, at 100 Temple Street. Also, pleased to say, the performance of our solar array at Avonmouth, although obviously the challenge of climate action and emergency that we find ourselves in relation to sunnier temperatures and longer periods of sunshine, it does have an upside in the context of solar generation. And we've seen that with some of the best performing months we've had since the system's gone in. So we were able to sell back to the grid generation that we don't need to offset against our half-hourly sites, which David explained in terms of how we construct our energy bills. So that did provide some upside also. And with the sunny weather in June and July as well, in relation, that will have a positive impact. So I expect that mitigation to be addressed through the service and across GNR as a division, of which the energy service is in. And the report also highlights risks and opportunities within our area in terms of what the risk is and what the mitigations are. So there's some context there. And then section C of the report details the two strands of capital expenditure, both in the energy space. So we have a £11 million budget for decarbonisation that we're working through, and you'll see that the current run rate or expenditure on that budget is very low. We use this money to match a lot of grant that comes in, particularly public sector decarbonisation funds, and therefore working through options with City Leap. So that money at the moment is forecasted to potentially underspend in P3 and to be reprofiled into next year. And then the energy service renewable energy schemes linked to solar implementation and projects is forecasted to be on spend or on budget. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Were there any questions relating to the finance report, especially that appendix from page 65 relating to this committee? I have one. So if we've underspent on the capital and it's related to the public sector decarbonisation scheme, with no further rounds of that being offered, will we have to retarget that and find new ways to make those investments?
So,
will that affect our decarbonisation programme?
Thanks, Alex. Thanks. Yes, in relation to part of City Leap, in relation to working with City Leap for innovation and the ability for what the council can offer, the opportunity to access grants, both government and other grants, gives us that opportunity to make us a valuable and attractive solution to get into partnership with Amoresco and Vattenfall, which is what we did. I'm hopeful that potentially the November settlement will generate potential other opportunity. So that's something that we are hopeful for. But yes, in terms of the public sector decarbonisation funds being announced, that they won't continue, does have an impact because, yes, we use that for match. We have a considerable pipeline across various strands of obviously net zero activity, particularly EV, retrofit, warm homes, glazing and others where potentially this money is clearly needed. So we clearly will work with the client team, with Alex's team as well, to ensure how best we can use that funds, as well as consider any potential opportunity for investor save, investor grow, investor maintain opportunities through capital, through budget process.
Great.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks very much. Obviously, we have to keep an eye on that. Councillor Weston had a question, and then Councillor King.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on Appendix A7, when we talk about the 1.5 million overspend in our budgets, the service is working on options to eliminate this pressure. What are the options? Maybe asking a dumb question, but I can't see it in the thing. There's a few bits there, but it doesn't seem to quite eliminate it. Are you confident we can eliminate it, or how does that sit?
Confident we can eliminate the majority of that through, for example, looking at how we use water, so use of grey water, where we, for example, in fountains and within the front of City Hall. For example, we used water where we could use grey water. The solar array overperforming is a mitigation, and we had considerable heat imbalance at Temple Street, significant imbalance, which potentially addressed that now, which will hopefully then bring down energy costs as well. So there's also consideration to look at when the heating season kicks in relation to lowering the temperature by half a degree or a degree. So there is a suite of mitigations working through with the team, and we can bring this back to committee next time in terms of where we currently are and where we're tracking.
And are you confident you could do most of this mitigation in year, or will we have to roll?
No, I think we can do a lot of this. We would also look at how we then can offset that within Growth and Regen division, where currently there is some underspend within economy of place and management of place. So we would manage that within the division of Growth and Regen. So we are looking creatively to look at that. So, but if we can definitely provide an update at the next report to track it. Thanks. Next committee, sorry.
Thanks very much. Councillor King, you had a question.
Yeah, I just want to come in on the Public Sector Decarbonisation Fund. I think it's a bit premature to talk about the future of that fund when we don't know actually what's going to come out of the autumn spending review. We're still not aware of what might come down the road with that. But also the fact that we've pump primed the Warm Homes programme, putting 13.2 billion into that, is a massive, significant push towards supporting people to retrofit their homes for to support energy bills and energy security and putting money back into people's pockets. So I think we just need to be careful about talking about it like we're moving away from doing those things. It's more that there's a determination to support individuals living in communities, living in our city, that will still benefit from those programmes. But also I think we need to show the same sort of spirit and initiative that set up the City Leap programme in the first place, a public-private partnership that had that significant boost in investment that we're now seeing the benefits from, that we keep bringing through papers through from this committee and talking about how great that partnership was. I think we need to kind of talk about that kind of initiative, that kind of inspiration, taking inspiration from that for what we can do in the future, and not just kind of, expecting government to bail us out all the way. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Any other questions or comments? Okay. This report doesn't have recommendations because the original finance report was covered in the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee. So we just received that, but we've taken note of the points raised and the questions for future. So thanks everyone. Thanks for all the contributions. And those who've been following the meeting. The next meeting of the Environment and Sustainability Policy Committee is Thursday, the 25th of September, 2025. So we'll conclude the meeting now and thank everyone for attendance. But
I just had one more point, which was there's been in the news around the City Leap solar farm that's looking to be installed in Hartlepool Wood, but as councillor, I've not had any involvement with that, and so that came out without that coming to me.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'll look into that because I specifically remember saying,
I know, that's why.
Make sure members are
yeah. And just because the
that.
targeted land, there's been some social media outcry from some of the residents that it's on a space which was horses were kept. It's a walking place. People would really like to see it on roofs. So I'd just like to be just raising that.
Sure. So that sounds like something has been missed because it very specifically, I remember.
Yeah, and I've had relationship with City Leap, so.
Yeah, we'll look into that. I'll try and get that put right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So thanks everyone for the attendance. Just to remind members, we do have we're going to adjourn now, but in room 1P06, we're going to look at our future plans just to prioritise some things. Hopefully that won't take too long, but we're going to do that in a minute. So thank everyone for attendance. Meeting is closed. Thanks.